We're going to study now from a study of Tes with Rabash. We're going to be studying from Tes, Volume 1, Part 4. We are in the table of answers to the matters, and we are in item 87.
87. What are the two kinds of reflected light in Akudim? We've learned that there is reflected light which clothes the direct light. Now he comes and tells us that we should discern here 12 aspects. So I'm asking, what are those 12 aspects? 87. Two kinds of reflected light are immediately considered coupling of striking. One is the rejected light that doesn't expand in the vessel of Malchut due to the striking of the screen. And this reflected light is discerned as surrounding light. The second is the reflected light that is born by the mutual relation in terms of departure and separation of the phase 4 from the light, which connects with the rejected light. And it is the reflected light that rises from below upwards and clothes the 10 Sefirot of the direct light of Rosh. We've learned, in general, after the restriction, that records were left over the records that were left in the Malchut of circles. Whose Malchut of circles? Malchut, which said that it doesn't want to receive in order to receive. She wanted in order to bestow. She didn't want to receive in order to receive. So we've learned the light departed it. And that is called restriction. Only receiving in order to bestow. So this Malchut went and received that light again, which it didn't want to receive in order to bestow. This is called this Malchut, the record that is left in the Malchut of circles, that went and received the light again. We learned that Malchut made a calculation. How much can she receive in order to bestow? That she's going to receive. And what she cannot receive in order to bestow, but just receive in order to receive, meaning into the Malchut, that she will not receive. This we've learned simply. It's understandable. Now, he details two discernments. What we learned before, that she receives in order to bestow, he calls it reflected light. That can also, the intention, that can also be understood. The rejected light, also understandable, but the rejected light has two meanings. The rejected light, where the light comes, Hizif receives it first does a calculation that is called the rejected light. But is it really rejected? It turns out that the masach, the screen, rejects it. Or the rejected light means what she said, the part that cannot receive in order to receive, that is called rejected light. We'll get into the details. He tells us here the rejected light is called surrounding light. What does it mean, surrounding light? The light that is destined to come later internally. That is, his desire to benefit the created beings, as we've learned through the allegory, that there was 100% before the restriction. All of the 100% that was received in the toch, in the internality, meaning in order to bestow. So, by way of allegory, let's say Malchut made a calculation that she can receive in order to bestow 20%. Turns out the rejected lights is called 80%. The light, which we can say is the rejected light in general. And that means before she made the calculation. So what's the point here? He tells us the light that comes to the Masach, to the Malchut, Malchut doesn't want to receive it. She separates herself. He says the reflected light, the second is the reflected light that is born by the correlation between the departure and the withdrawal of phase 4 from the light. The negative force, which it doesn't want to receive, which connects with the rejected light. What does it mean that it connects? Since she doesn't want to receive the light due to adhesion, equivalence, so he receives from it some illumination. It turns out this illumination she receives is because she doesn't want to receive. Therefore, we as if say he later receives great light. By separating himself. And this great light is called that he has lights in that he wants to bestow, that he already has light and pleasure from wanting to bestow. Then she thinks, what can she give to the upper one so that the upper one will enjoy it? From receiving from the upper one the abundance. Turns out, by what can she receive the abundance in terms of internality? By the reflected light. What is reflected light? That is the pleasure she has in bestowal. If so, what is the question here? When is the reflected light born? The reflected which clothes? Here it means that before there was a separation. The light and the light that is rejected. And then the reflected light is born. Then she clothes that part of the reflected light. Look at what I'm analyzing here. We're learning who we're talking about, who received the light. The created being received the light. The created being is called receiver in order to receive. We learn simply. The light that comes with an intention to receive, he doesn't want to receive it in order to receive. And he rejects it. However, he wants in order to bestow. Therefore, she separates herself from the light. So I know that he separates from the essence of the light. She already has two things. One, it's mandatory to reject all the light. Two, the rejection itself. Who doesn't want to receive? The one who is called receiver in order to receive, where there is great yearning for that pleasure. Since there was a restriction, she overcomes herself and he doesn't want to receive in order to receive. Therefore, the light is rejected. So we can say that there are two things. One, the light comes, he receives in order to receive. Two, the receiver in order to receive now overcomes and rejects the light. Rejecting it, that's called the rejected light. You should know that this is the rejected light. This whole light has to be received, either now a little bit or afterwards, but it has to be received in the internality. So I can call the rejected light in general, that this whole light is called what? It's as if thank you and nothing. So now we learn the reflected light that is born, since it is rejected. Why? Due to equivalence of form. Therefore, she receives great pleasure through that separation. What is that separation? She wants equivalence of form. She wants to bestow. After he has this light, she clothes the light. That is, she then receives a part. So, accordingly, what do I lack? When did she make the calculation how much to receive? Now, as much as she received reflected light, that raises the question, who discerned how much reflected light she will receive? Why not? For what will I say that first she made a calculation, meaning she can receive, overcome in order to bestow only with, say, 20%, by way of allegory. And I say she received the reflected light through that 20%. So I know the light in phase 2, the clothing reflected light, is 20%. But I will say she rejected the light. By the rejected light, she received reflected light, which clothed how much? Who caused to determine this rate of how much percentage she will receive? That's not clear to me. First, if we say that who I'm talking about, the malchut that has received, then I say, I don't want to receive in these conditions. I want to receive only to the extent that I can bestow. Now, the question arises, how much, who gives her the force? It's like she herself, an example of a person who makes a calculation, how much he can aim in order to bestow, how much he cannot. That depends on the quality of the person. This we see. We can say such an allegory. The Malchut also, which is called receiving in order to receive, made a calculation for herself how much she can, according to her conscience, as we say. That I can understand. But what's my question here? What the reflected light clothes is born from the rejected light. By that she receives a part from the force of separation, the force of the light. That part, when was it made? If that part was made by the calculation, therefore, as much as she can, it turns out, first, what was the calculation? Then she received a part of the reflected light, or the other way around? That's what I said is unclear here. What's missing? Understood? When we talk about spirituality, there are two issues. This is both the learned lesson and the corporeal parable. One, that one will feel that it isn't good to receive in order to receive, that he will feel unpleasantness, that he will feel separation. He bestows and I receive. Therefore, I take upon myself a restriction. Two, and I want to bestow to the host as well. And here in spirituality, it's more difficult. Equivalence of form in truth. If a person says that he doesn't want to receive spirituality, turns out he makes a restriction between equivalence of form. The upper one raises light, raises deficiencies, he has nothing, so he has to receive to have light. Also due to equivalence, don't forget. If so, he also has to receive. That we need to remember, this condition. The lower one can, but I don't want to receive. But he is in a deficiency, and he has no pleasures. And so there's also no equivalence of form. There's equivalence in terms of what he receives, but the upper one, we should say, full of pleasure, and the lower one is full of deficiencies. Turns out before he received fulfillment, where he feels himself full with abundance, it's also equivalence. Don't forget that. There are two conditions here in equivalence of form, in the equivalence of form in spirituality. Here it is written, because he rejects, he wants equivalence, and that means he receives pleasure from the rejected light. For what? For wanting to bestow. And it's like he asked before. Afterwards, when he feels great pleasure in order to bestow, what does the upper one lack? To receive light. And therefore, this causes him to receive light. Turns out, first, there has to be reflected light, which is born from these two aspects, that he has this reflected light, then he can receive into internality. He says this: after he received reflected light, meaning the light of pleasure from the rejected light, and from the force of separation, then he has a pleasure of bestowing to the upper one. What does it give to the upper one? So he says, So he says to receive light. That's what does the upper one lack? That he will receive pleasures from him. So now what? I have to receive the abundance. This is called clothing the direct light. And this is in potential, and afterwards he receives in practice. Why does he receive? Because he wants to bestow to the upper one. This is called bestowing to the upper one. It is called receiving in order to bestow. If he only bestows, there's no wholeness yet. So one is that there's two. What actions here? One, that he receives the light. Two, that he rejects the light. Three, from these two, new light is born. Four, when he has new light, it is called the reflected light of the second kind. So now I see that I have to receive, otherwise I have nothing to bestow to the upper one. And then so he sees what is missing. What is missing for the upper one? To receive pleasures from him, that he will receive pleasures from him. So now he has to receive the abundance. This is called clothing the direct light. It's called in potential. And then he receives it in practice. Why does he receive? Because he wants to bestow to the upper one. It is called bestowing to the upper one. It's called receiving in order to bestow. Only bestowing is not yet wholeness. So what actions do we have? One, that he receives the light. Two, that he rejects the light. Three, from these two, new light is born. Four, that when he has a new light, which is called the reflected light of the second kind, then if I now see that I have to receive, then I have nothing to bestow to the upper one. After that, all of these four phases we call clothing in potential. And after that, he goes and receives in practice. Why? It's not that it's not good to you. This could be confusing. Afterwards, we learn that the second restriction was made, and there's katnut and gadlut, infancy and adulthood. Katnut means that he bestows in order to bestow. Adulthood is wholeness, and wholeness is actually receiving in order to bestow. He asks the following. We learn here that Malchut didn't want to receive the light, and she attained the force to clothe by the rejected light. That's the force she received in the Rosh. It stays. And afterwards we've learned what exists in the Rosh later expands in the Guf, meaning she receives in practice. And we've learned that if she receives in practice, that place is called Malchut of Guf, Tabu.